How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Tap the banner or visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number, 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number, save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to be talking about Homeschooled, which is a book by Stefan, and I'm actually going to be interviewing him on my podcast. And if you don't want any spoilers from this book, then I guess I'll tell you when they start. But just so that you know, this is not just about homeschooling at all. It is a memoir that I would recommend to any adult child of a dysfunctional family. The point of this book was his journey homeschooling with his mother, who basically homeschooled him for her own deeper psychological reasons, such as that she found it, really is the only reason, is she found it very hard to separate from him and to individuate from him. And she wanted to be very close to him, and it just does not really work out to take a kid and isolate them for your own purposes, even if you love them super much. And what I really liked about this memoir is that he was very balanced and he didn't villainize his mother, even though he could have, and that would have been a less interesting book. And he talked about kind of the push-pull between his own experience of being the favorite child, because he had another brother, there's another sibling. He also wanted to make her happy. He also liked some aspects of being so close to her. But then, things kind of got weird. And he didn't really know until he was older how to extricate himself. And even when he tried, it was rife with problems because the mother did not individuate easily. And there's going to be spoilers from this point on, so you could just fast forward to the next one if you want, to the next episode. And if so, thank you for listening to the Dr. Psych Mom Show, and please do subscribe for 220 extra episodes. All right, spoilers. So what happened here to Stefan, who's a very nice guy, and I've actually been chatting with him on Instagram because I had to get him onto my podcast, and I'm sure it's going to be a great episode, so that'll be coming out soon. But what happened is he didn't want to be homeschooled. He complained, though, about school. And that's like an example of how he's balanced in this narrative. He complained because when he complained, she got happy. So the mother's mood was very tied to him. She suffered from depression. I'm thinking there was some probably borderline personality disorder. There was a lot of stuff going on. And for her internally. And she had just moved across country, it seems, and away from a lot of her support system. And she idealized the time of the boy's childhood, specifically Stefan, her little blonde boy, and she loved him so much, and she just wanted to get back to that time. And it's a very understandable impulse for anybody who's a parent, or at least for many women. And I've discussed it so often in posts and podcast episodes about why does your wife get so upset when the kids get older? Why is your wife sad about the kids growing up? Because a lot of men really don't understand the grief that you feel. And from my own experience, I've told you that I identify as an adult child of dysfunctional family myself. My parents were very anxious. They were overprotective. They never went this far, though, as he was homeschooling with her and they weren't even doing school. They were just hanging out. He was doing his own thing, and periodically she would kind of give him some sort of directives at the beginning, but then that kind of faded out. By the time he was in 8th grade, this seemed to go from about 4th grade to 8th grade or something. I could be wrong. But he was doing okay socially, and he complained, and that dovetailed with her own desire to have a life purpose, and the life purpose is going to be to homeschool him. And the homeschooling didn't have any stuff like it did. And she didn't have, it's not like she had no capacity to do classes, because ironically, and like one of the most bitter twists of this tale, she started to not homeschool, but tutor other children in the house. But by that time, he was so kind of divorced from the social scene and had no idea how to behave with increasing isolation over the years that he didn't even participate with these children, even though they were in his house. So it's kind of like water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. And so she had the capacity to teach, but she just didn't because she was depressed and she just liked being around him. At some point, she starts like bleaching his hair so he could be back to like the blonde baby that she knew. And it's kind of, and you know, one question that I am going to ask Stefan is, where was the father? To some degree, the father was what you usually see in this is seemed to take a passive role and a backseat role and didn't want to really think about what was going on. There was one kid who was at school, okay, and then there was another one being homeschooled, and if you just say it like that, then maybe it's right. And she always said how brilliant he was. I mean, the guy ends up writing multiple books, so I mean, she was right that he was gifted in some regards, obviously, at least in the verbal sphere. But she talked about him and heaped praise on him, which of course made him also want to be close to her. And I don't think it was manipulative either, possibly partially, but the overarching goal that she had was to keep him close, to love him because he was her reason for living. And the father kind of opted out a bit. And he chose not to see what was going on, chose not to make problems, not to make waves. I've talked repeatedly about this, and many of you recognize this theme from listening to my podcast and posts, like who's really dysfunctional there? Like there's a flagrantly dysfunctional parent, but then a lot of people get into therapy and they say, what about the parent that enabled this stuff happening? Right? So that's like a whole other interesting topic for anybody reading this memoir, because you don't have to be homeschooled to identify with this memoir a lot. It was really, really interesting psychologically. And I've shared, obviously, I was an only child and parents were very anxious, and it wasn't like this. I went to school, but it was really a kind of isolating atmosphere, particularly in the absence of school. So I did go to school. It's not like you really know how to behave at school, though, if you're treated a certain way at home. And I was also considered very brilliant at home, you know? And you go in, you kind of show off, which is how it's kind of a sad tale of him trying to keep one of his friends from school, but he kind of acts like a show off, and then his mother like totally sabotages it by saying that the friend has to pay to come over because she's really babysitting him when she just wanted the friend gone, obviously. But anyway, so he didn't really know how to act because at home he was rewarded for the wrong kind of behavior. We're very similar to the situation of many only children who are adult children of dysfunctional families, because you're rewarded for doing whatever the parent needs you to be versus what's socially appropriate. And what's socially appropriate is not to show off, it's not to brag, it's not to raise your hand every single time that you know the answer. Of course you're going to know all the answers because all you talk to is adults, right? So you're light years ahead of the other kids intellectually at times, but emotionally and socially, you're far behind. And this is what happens. Finally, he gets to high school, and he says he's going to go to the public school no matter what. And you got to read the book to see what happens there in his first days. But it wasn't good. It took him a really, really long time to dig his way out of the hole and to figure out how to act among other children. And at first he had to take some sort of like a court jester sort of role with the more popular children so that he could be in the group, even if it was a role of like a nerd, you know, like this classic, you remember like Steve Urkel is what I thought of when he was describing it. So he took more of that role because at least if he can make the kids laugh, they will want him around. And so a lot of people go into this homeschooling thing, and Stefan Block goes out of his way to say this isn't all homeschoolers, homeschooling could be fine, it needs more oversight, because it seemed like she didn't have to submit any plans anywhere. I mean, there was some talk about the legalities of homeschooling in Texas, but you know me, I tried to get to the psychological meat of it, so I don't remember if there was no oversight, if she had to give in any plans at all, but I'll tell you, there are reasons that people do things. And homeschooling is one of those things that definitely should only be done by like the most mentally healthy of people. And they should have to have certain requirements, including strict requirements for socialization, which is so, so super important. And overall, I mean, going beyond that, I think parents overall need some kind of oversight with strict rules for socialization and not yelling in front of the kids and not being abusive and all sorts of shit. But definitely if you're going to take the child out of the normative group atmosphere, there really needs to be a reason. The kid really needs to like beg you to do that. And it's so easy to become codependent. I don't think any children should be like one-to-one, just like homeschooled alone by one adult. That seems like a hell of a way to spend the only childhood you're ever going to get. And again, this is not just for homeschoolers. This is not just for boys with mothers. This is about anybody who felt like a parentified child, because what happened over time is despite her wanting to be so much his mommy and he the baby, he was really the one who was taking care of her emotionally. His job was to make her happy. His job was to make her feel loved. His job was to be her baby, and that manifests in some dark ways in the book, which I really am sure that y'all are going to read it now, but because it's like really good, and because I tell myself that my listeners will do what I advise, whether or not that's true. But this has so much overlap with people raised by alcoholic parents, people raised by depressed parents, people raised by anxious parents. If you are in that enmeshed one-on-one, like it's nearly a romantic love relationship. The parent is getting so much from being with you that you feel so guilty leaving them ever. And the individuation is often cataclysmic. And in this case, it really put her on the road to alcoholism, the mother. And she was already on the road, but it really speeded it up. And that's real. And in order to like have your sense of self, you have to understand that you may literally destroy the parent and that you got to live your life anyway. And that is a realization that many people struggle with. And I work with people on this in therapy all the time. What do you owe your parents psychologically, morally, ethically? Is it your whole self? Is it all of your mental health? Because I don't think it is. It's kind of like when people say, God wouldn't want me to get divorced. Would God want you to be in a super unhappy, constantly toxic, dysfunctional relationship where you're fighting in front of the kids all the time? I don't know if I would want to believe in that kind of God if I was that person. So it's like, do you want the love of a parent who cannot, like, be a parent to you, who has to kind of be in this role where you're supporting them more than they're supporting you? So anyway, that is a quick rendition of many things, not everything that I loved about this memoir. And I hope y'all listen all the way to the end, at least some of you. Some people really do not like surprises in books, which I don't get because I love surprises. I would have totally tapped out after the spoiler sentence that I gave earlier on, but hopefully I've piqued enough interest. It's an awesome book. I'm going to be interviewing this guy, and he wrote some other novels, which I'm sure I'll read after, because I just finished this one. But point is, if you're an adult child of dysfunctional families, reading can really help you. There's so many other books out there about like real, like horrible physical abuse, And like, for example, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, about more psychological, quote, abuse. But being a parentified child is also emotional abuse. This was a memoir of emotional abuse, and it was really balanced and kind and empathic. And obviously he's done a lot of work to understand and not villainize his parent. And he was able to start his own life by virtue of recognizing, even if he didn't put those words to it, that this was not right and it wasn't healthy. And people, no matter what their interaction is with their own dysfunctional families, people have to kind of realize how to set boundaries. And this is also a book about the journey of learning to set boundaries, even with a parent you really do love and that loves you. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. And I'll talk to everybody soon. Have a great day.